Hello, everyone. I'd like to take you through my career and kind of how it started, how it evolved, and share with you at every stage what I felt was important to adapt and keep improving. So I learned chess when I was 6 years old. I was very lucky that my mother played chess, because 40 years ago you couldn't look these things up. You know, there was maybe 2 libraries in the city where you could read up the rules or something. So almost everyone who learned chess then learned it from some family member or a friend. So my mother taught me when I was 6. Few months later, she realized I was going back to the chessboard of my own free will, as opposed to many other things that I was taught that I completely ignored. This I would keep going back and looking at the chessboard and so on. She thought, okay, maybe it interests him. Let's look for a chess club. By a nice coincidence, there happened to be a chess club right opposite my sister's university. And even nicer was, this happened to be the strongest chess club in India at that point, the Tal Chess Club. So I went there and started to play with the seniors. And mostly they were all seniors. A couple of boys my age were starting to play as well, but mostly people at least 15 years older. And I would go there and play chess constantly. The timings of the club were Monday evenings, Thursday evenings, and Sundays the whole day. So after a while, my life revolved around that. Especially Saturday evenings, I would sit and finish all my homework so that I had no problem spending the whole Sunday there, 11 till 7 in the evening, and just playing 5-minute games. And this sounds strange, but in fact, one of the best ways to learn chess is to play a lot of games in very accelerated time controls. In a sense, playing chess is like a language. The more you play it, the more you play it fast. Very few of us, when we compose a sentence, do we think, where does the noun go, where does the verb go? It doesn't work like that. You just play chess because the move pops into your head in the same way that a word pops into your head. So this turned out to be a very good way to practice. And to be honest, if you're 7 years old, it's probably about the only thing you're willing to do. At this stage, how did I see myself improving? How did I think I could get better at it? And honestly, I didn't give it a lot of thought. When you're 6 and 7, it seems obvious to you that you will improve at everything. It seems obvious to you that you just have to keep learning and trying new things. And the main thing that carries you forward is just optimism. And I could see almost a correlation. Every time I learned or experimented with something new, after a few months passed, you could see that my results would go up a bit better. Crucially, what I didn't do much at this stage, I did look at the games that I played and note down certain ideas that occurred to me, how I could improve the next time. But typically I would write it down, mainly because my mother told me this was a good habit to follow. I would write my observations down and then just move on. You want to learn something new rather than sit and analyze what went wrong and things like that. So very innocent age, and it's normal. I think most chess players at that stage go forward like this. And roughly this phase continued till I became one of the best juniors in the country. And I had gone like 2 or 3 years without a big improvement in my results, but I never gave up. I would just keep going and playing. Especially school holidays was the best time. You know, you got 2 months to yourself. You could play chess all the time. And that was very nice. So I finally, when I became the national sub-junior and junior champion, at the same time, I also qualified for the men's championship. It was a kind of magical 3 months for me, because I went from being a good junior in Tamil Nadu to one of the best players in the country. And suddenly I realized I have a goal in front of me, you know, to become a grandmaster. Then when I was trying to become a grandmaster, this was kind of the first time that there was a clear goal, a clear target, as opposed to this vague idea that I just get better at something. I had a clear target, which was to achieve the 3 or 4 results I would need to get the title. So these are very specific. You have to have performances equivalent to a certain rating level. You have to do it 3 times over 24 games. And then the federation checks your results and approves the title for you. So I spent the best part of 2 years, the whole of 1986 and a good part of 87, missing the title requirement on every occasion. I would miss it by very, very narrow margins, half a point, which is like the absolute minimum you can miss it by. And sometimes things would go wrong and I'd miss it by even more. But I was coming close on many occasions. And it started to get frustrating. Initially, I thought I'm very close, it's just a matter of time. But a little bit later, I realized that last half point is very, very difficult. So looking back, I think the best thing for me was to have my +2 exams at that point. So for 3 months, I was forced to stop playing chess. So I had to get back to school, catch up with all the school I'd missed, and prepare in a hurry for the +2 exams, which I did. And this was a nice break because I really had no time for chess. And about 4 months later, after I finished my exams, then with a clear conscience, I could go back to playing chess. And that was fantastic. I mean, I still went back to missing the norms, as I mentioned, but I felt much better. Obvious learning is that sometimes you just have to take a break. You have to stop. So you cannot improve in just a very linear fashion. Sometimes you stop, and it's nice to have an alternate, a good reason to do so, like your exams, but can be anything else, maybe some personal, some hobby you want to indulge in, or something you want to attend, and so on. You take a break, and then you come back and continue where you left. It kind of clears the head a bit. So within 3 months, I won the World Junior title for the first time. And in fact, this was the higher accomplishment. No Asian had ever won the World Junior, and most World Junior champions went on to become world champions. So this actually was very significant for me. And then a few months later, I finally made the title. And so when I finally made the title, I completed the requirements in December of 1987. It just went past. I didn't even realize it. And so I've always, influenced by this and by my earlier breakthrough, I've always had the feeling that you can work for a long time at something, and as long as you don't give up or get frustrated, typically the improvement will come at some point. It takes a while for all the things you're learning for your head to put it together, but then there's a qualitative leap of strength. So after I became a Grandmaster, the first thing was I had like 4 lousy tournaments. This is again something that people told me was very normal. You have a clear goal for a long time. I mean, every tournament I went, I knew what I had to do. I had to make this percentage because that's what the Grandmaster requirement is set at. I will do that. And there was nothing else. I wouldn't even think about winning the tournament. I only wanted to make my title. So for the first time, and Grandmaster titles are like, for life. You don't have to keep earning it again and again. So after I became a Grandmaster, suddenly I used to go to tournaments and find it very strange that I missed this very clear goal, this target. I would go and think, well, it'd be nice to make that score, but I can do a bit better or a bit worse, and it doesn't really matter. And it's like a cyclist suddenly finding that no one is around, and your pace just drops. But maybe more significantly, at the level I was now competing in, which was typically against other Grandmasters, I found that I could no longer just improve by learning something new. Because other Grandmasters are preparing very systematically for you. They are scanning your games, and they are looking at what are the typical mistakes you make. And they think, well, why don't we aim for that mistake again? And so once you lose the same game twice or thrice, you realize, okay, this has to stop. I have to go back and look at myself like other people look at me and fix these problems. I mean, it's too simplistic to say it's the first time I was doing this, but it's the first time I had to actually approach it systematically. Nonetheless, though, I think the idea that you improve by learning new things is correct, but you also have to see what you've played and correct your mistakes. I think it's safe to say that you can correct your technical mistakes. Just look at what you did wrong. Look at people who do it correctly. Try to make some observations and fix it. And again, I went back to competing in as many tournaments as possible. And I qualified for something called the candidates, which is the last, at that time it was last 16, now it's the last 8. But at that time it was the last 16, and you played matches with each other, and the winner got to play the World Championship. So which was the next big goal for me. And finally in 1990, I qualified, the end of that, so 3 years I'd been trying. In 91, I got to play my first cycle. I almost beat Anatoly Karpov then, and for a first cycle, it was a very decent attempt. I mean, he'd already been world champion on 4 occasions. He had played about 6 matches with Kasparov, and here I was coming very, very close to beating him. In fact, in my match against him, I saw that in terms of the number of winning positions I had 5, he had 2. But in terms of conversion, I had 1 win out of 5, and he had 2 out of 2. So you start to see that, okay, these guys, they may look vulnerable, but there's more tenacity, resilience, whatever you want to call it. And I remember a funny observation I made then, which was that in some earlier tournament where I posed no threat to him, Karpov told people, oh, he's a very talented young boy, he will go very far, this and that. And then when I actually finished ahead of him in a tournament, right after we played this match, he said, no, well, he's too flippant and he plays, he's not very professional, he's, along those lines. And I thought, okay, maybe he got the order wrong. But you realize that when you actually threaten someone, then they are not so free with the compliments. But as long as, so in fact, a friend of mine joked that you should be more worried when they say you're talented because it means you're not threatening them. But nonetheless, it's my first chance to play against someone at that level. and realize that they fight at every level, including psychological. And even though it didn't work for him, because I had trained with the right people. For me, having this World Championship in front of me was my first chance to work with trainers. I had never worked with trainers because it didn't exist then. We just hung out with each other and discussed stuff, but we never sat down like they did in the Soviet Union. But when I started playing these matches, I had to get proper trainers and work in a very systematic way. So I worked with a player called Gurevich, whose job it was, earlier he had worked for Kasparov in his matches and so on. So in a way, I would get to see what the best players think like, how they prepare and so on. And this was fantastic for me. Every time I had one session with Gurevich, for the next 4 months I didn't need to work because there was so much material I could use, and I felt so confident for a while. I learned some other things from Gurevich. When we started to work, I told him kind of innocently, by the way, on TV they're going to show Star Trek. Do you mind if I leave it on while we're working? And he said, if you want, you can watch Star Trek. I will wait in my house, and when you're finished, I'll come back and we can work. But I don't do work while watching TV programs. So you see, new attitude. But he also taught me how to look at Karpov. He said, for Karpov, it is not very important to play his own plans. He will try to guess what you are planning, and he will try to make moves that stop it. Which for me was mind-blowing, because for me, I was very direct, very innocent, straight. I have my plans. I try to execute them. Of course, I take my opponent's possibilities into account, but what I'm doing is my thing. But this idea that I could stop what I'm doing and just try to put a spanner in the works what my opponent is doing, it was very original to me. And then with that insight, when I started playing the match with Karpov, I found suddenly I was able to guess his moves, thinking he probably thinks I want to do this. So I think, 1/3, 2/3, you'll get your guesses right, and you feel very good. He told me another thing. He said Karpov will get into time pressure, partly because he gets confused, but also because he knows that will excite you. You'll think that you've got him on the run, and then you'll get excited and you'll start to play fast. So it's very important you control yourself. So once again, this insight, but it was a very Soviet thing to approach chess at that kind of level. And it is my first exposure to this kind of psychology. So we're not talking technical improvements anymore. We're talking, this is what your opponent will do to you. He's trying to produce this effect that you will get hasty, or you'll get excited and you'll stop being objective, and so on. So for me, it was a period of huge growth. And by the time I competed in the next cycle, I had already become more or less a permanent member of the top 3 in the world. So by 94, I was in the top 3, and I remained there more or less for 25 years. So in 95, I finally went through the candidate cycle, qualified to play Kasparov. And for the first time then, I had to assemble a big team of seconds. So it was no longer enough to have one person with you, because you're playing a match with a very large prize fund, and you're playing for the world title, and it's announced 5 or 6 months in advance. The venue, the place you'll be staying, and everything. So then both sides will start to have huge teams and methodically scan everything. So I expanded my previous team. I had one part-time American junior friend who I would work with in small tournaments, and I had a Soviet trainer called ex-Soviet. Many of these guys moved abroad, and that's kind of what helped the rest of the world catch up at that point. And he was the person I was working with regularly. But then I added 2 more people who had played in the previous cycles and so on. And once again, when you're challenged like this, you expand a lot. My way of working was, and still, is to very quickly make up my mind what I want to do, and then follow that through. And this is not, to put it mildly, the only way of working, and it's probably not the best way of working systematically. Now, when you work in a large team, it allows you to pick people who will correct your deficiencies, and they will allow your strengths to flourish. So for the first time, I was working we were working 8-9 hours a day, plus we would do 1 or 2 hours of exercise in the morning. I would either go for a run on the hilltop or go cycling there. Each one had his own routine, and then we'd work for hours. And the whole day you have people who disagree with you, which is again a strange concept, because you think, well, there's a right way of doing things and not so right way of doing things. But there's enough scope in chess that you can have multiple points of view. And also, it's really a question of, to understand something very deep, you can approach it, the problem-solving methods all converge in the end, but the way of finding it is different. So I had my way, they had their way. And I was forced to see new viewpoints. I mean, people disagreeing about the value of a bishop in a certain position, or the value of a knight, or whether it was good to sacrifice a pawn, and this kind of disagreement. For the moment, it was not complicated for me to sit and learn, because these are all, I was by far the youngest of this group, except my one junior friend. The other 3 were all at least 18 years older. So I tried to learn as much as possible. I played my first match. And you realize at how many levels things can go wrong, and you try to get better at that. So after 1995, when I became world champ, when I played the first world title, I had to persevere for 2 more cycles before I became world champion in 2000. And then for reasons which not connected to chess, but we had a split in the federations, and so for a while, no world title matches got held. But finally, in 2007, I got a chance to play another world title. So the federations had negotiated some unified title, long story, but I got a chance to play in the next world title series. And so once again, after 12 years, I had to assemble a team. But in the meantime, a few things had happened. The computers, which at one point were just very, very good databases. I could look up 3-4 million games very quickly. And the way you look for it is like this. Tell me what Kramnik plays with the white pieces in this pawn structure, and what is his score against, is it above 50%, below 50%? You can really drill down and look for very small. And this, of course, the computer is very good. Once upon a time, we relied on books, but people had to remember which game they're thinking of and where to find it in the library and so on. And of course, computers got very good. But another thing which happened in the meantime was computers started to play better and better. So initially, they just annoyed us by constantly telling us that our idea was not perfect. and then they just started refuting the idea. Even when they got stronger than us, for about 3-4 years, we could disagree with them. There are things we, especially with long-term judgment, that we were still much better at. We could disagree with them and basically prove the point. But by 2003 or 4, even that moment had passed. And basically if you roughly think of the doubling of speed every 18 months, as Moore said, then you get this point when their horizon finally crosses everything that you can learn, all your long-term judgment. And so one of the things that I assembled was, this time I thought I would get a team, relatively young players. In fact, now I was the oldest guy in the team, as opposed to the last time. Not always by a big margin, but there were some people more than 10 years younger than me and so on. And once again, I got this experience of having people look at things totally different from you. I mean, what I thought I brought to the table was my old techniques, which had been tested a lot, knowledge maybe that computers didn't quite appreciate, and things like that. But you realize also that these youngsters had fundamentally different ways of looking at things. For them, this thing of, oh, I used to do it like this, but now I work like this, didn't exist. They had never known high-level chess work without a computer assisting them. So for them, it was always, first let the computer go and, let's see what turns up in the search tree. And then we will try to see what we can grasp out of that. So now the nature of your chess skill changed a lot. You had to think in every position, what is the computer trying to tell me? But before that, you had to think for yourself and think, well, what do I think about this position? Then, invariably, it will disagree with you. But then you have to understand, is it I'm right, but I was wrong in the details? Because always the computer, I mean, it's doing 9, 10 moves ahead. And we do basically 3 or 4 moves ahead, despite what you hear about chess players. You can't go that far. So did I just get a few details wrong? Was my idea was basically correct? Or was my idea just inaccurate? And you have to start. On the other hand, you don't have to do much work on a position, because it's doing most of the cleaning work for you. So it gives you the complete analysis tree, but your job is to sit there and understand it. But you have to understand it at an intuitive level. So once we had assembled the computer's conclusions, my trainers would give me, they would pick positions from what they had seen that day, very deep in the tree, so you can always find something I would never have looked at. They would put in front of me and make me solve different positions just to see if, and slowly, because again, I'll go back to the language example. If I have not learned how to feel a position as if the moves come naturally, it's not much use. You have to develop to that stage. And of course, once again, we were doing, like I mentioned before, 8 or 9 hour days. I mean, to keep it going, we would often play many songs in the background, entire albums sometimes, because we were sitting there so long. And one thing I noticed, it's quite easy to remember some conclusion if you associate it with a certain song. So, if there's some Coldplay song that you heard at whatever, 10 o'clock in the morning, and when you were looking at that position, even months later, if you can't remember the position, you'll remember the song, then you'll remember the position, then you'll remember the thing. It's a nice way of working, and one of the advantages of working with a young group. The harder bit for me was to look at many of the conclusions I would have and realize there's a lot of wrong conclusions that are sitting in my head. I don't know myself they exist. You look at a position, you obviously think this is the best move, but then you realize this is not the best move. And when you look and work backwards to think, well, why isn't it the best move? You realize you might see a pattern. This reason is the same reason I think something else is good, and the same reason. We have our own experiences based on our games, and they're all sitting in your head. And you can slowly work on it. But of course, it's the hardest thing to correct. You cannot correct something like a bias because it's very deep-rooted. It comes to the surface only very rarely. And you'll have to go back and question almost every example where it happens. But it's anyway interesting. You don't have to fix every problem as long as you're open to the idea that there's new things to be learned, and you're open to the idea that you don't have to, that you don't have a strong opinion about something. Don't have a strong opinion about anything, in fact. Sit at the board and allow for the possibility you're wrong, even if you strongly feel you're right, and then, go from there. Then you can cope. One more thing I found that working with the team taught me is that I learned it's best not to offer any opinion first. So I'm working with my trainers, and a couple of times I would make the mistake of saying, oh, I think this move is good or something. And then a few, maybe 10, 15 minutes later of checking, you realize it's not very good. But your ego gets stuck into it. You realize that you don't want to let go of the point very easily, so you try harder and harder to justify it. And at some point, I made a note. It's not easy to climb back once you have invested your ego in something, but at least when there's a fresh start tomorrow, I could remind myself, okay, let me let the others speak, see which one I want to agree with, and I'll go with that. And that made it easier because it's not my viewpoint. I could change my mind and everything. But also simply using the fact that other people are good at things that you are not, and vice versa. That's the whole point of having a team. Learning from somebody do something much better than you is kind of the whole point of assembling. This is a moving target. The team I assembled in 2008 for my match with Kramnik, I think that's the best match I've ever played. It is better than all the previous matches. I mean, absolute pinnacle, both creatively and with the result. And I think it's because after a long time I was working with a fresh team, fresh methods. We were working very productively with very high-end computers. And maybe the fourth and most important thing, I had changed my repertoire for that match. Instead of playing my opening move that I played most of my life, I was switching to something else. The main reason I did this was that against Kramnik, I tended to not make much headway in. So my dominant line was the one that he was very good at neutralizing. So I could stick to it, and that's low risk. But what I decided was I would rather play something where I'm unfamiliar, but that I have some chance of shaking him up rather than. So I had never beaten him with the white pieces until that point. But after that, I won. So my aim was to focus on the black pieces. And by changing this, working with a good team, and also because I was unfamiliar with the material, there was some sense of danger. I knew that it's like suddenly speaking a second or third language. You're not quite as fluent. So I knew that I can make mistakes, and I was, I think, much more concentrated than when you're doing the familiar thing and you get too much into autopilot. And that was still my best result. After that, I mean, all of us got along so well. The team was wonderful. So we stuck to this team for the next 3 matches. But we would still invite guests, because every once in a while it's good to have someone who's not used to everybody else. And it's just uncomfortable enough that questions get asked, because otherwise it's too easy to settle into familiar routine. The main thing is, when you're with friends, you don't, at some point you stop challenging what you don't like, because you're used to them, and they stop challenging what they don't like about you, because they're used to you. But on the chessboard, somebody needs to ask that question, kind of thing. So we would bring in a regular stream of visitors, 3 or 4, each visiting us for a week or something, just to move things around. But probably at some point I realized it's, well, people are bored as well, so they also want to move on, and I could have changed core members as well in that team. Anyway, I won 3 more world titles. I defended my title 3 times, and for me, that was the best period in terms of learning. By this point, computers had got to the stage where not only was their analysis correct, more or less by definition, what they said was absolutely correct to a precision that we cannot match. But quite often the opinions were totally scrambled. By that I mean there was no easy pattern to say that. So when I was growing up, it is based on human chess knowledge over hundreds of years. We had principles like you can put your pieces in the center, or develop all your pieces before doing something, or this kind of counter-attacking possibility is okay, but that is not, and things like that. But to put it another way, there are broad principles in chess, but instead of principles being right 80% of the time, they're more likely to be correct 53% of the time, or something like that. So it's not that you shouldn't know the rule, but the number of exceptions keeps multiplying. And I think what computers and AI have brought to that is this kind of flattening, that everything has to be looked at afresh, and there are very few ways to group these things into some kind of knowledge which applies everywhere. And so an even more modern generation, so people who are born in 2006 and so on, this is the generation which is now competing at the top of world chess. People like Gukesh and Prag and Arjun and so on, they are all, I mean, I think the oldest one is 2004 born. So, and so for them, this is so self-evident when I speak to them. I mean, I'll keep on telling them, it's amazing, but this works, and they cannot even understand why I'm surprised. Because for them, they never had this thing that this is the rule, and anything which breaks it is a great news. For them, there was no rule ever. That's, I think, the advantage of growing up without any bias. Though I will repeat, it's better to have some anchors, and at some point they will develop them as well. All of them play 10 or 15 openings. Nobody sticks to one opening, because if you are predictable, if people can say, this is where my opponent will be tomorrow, so I can wait for them here, computers change everything. Specialization doesn't mean very much, because if I check something with the computer and come and play you tomorrow, it's good enough for that day. And a computer allows you to bridge any sort of gap in practice and experience. So the main thing is to get in surprise. And so this ability to play almost anything and just look it up in a hurry and play anything freely, and to be comfortable with the risk that you're taking, because you might just look helpless in a few moves, but you have to push yourself to do that. That is the direction in which modern chess is going. I have the feeling that in most areas, people are amazed by what AI produces for similar reasons. I don't know if it's quite as drastic as in chess, because it turns out chess is a very, very predictable game. It's very mathematical. There is no unknown information in chess, and so on. So it's almost designed for computers. Other walks of life are much more chaotic. So the strength gap might not be that big, but in chess it's definitely huge. And finally, I'd like to conclude with one aspect of change. About 6 years ago, I started to hear stories about people meeting with gamers, and at that point chess was not considered a e-sport, so to speak. And that they would sit on these platforms and chat with each other, and some of them were doing streaming and so on. And I thought, okay, some guys who can't sleep at night, and it's fine. And then the next year, we had the pandemic, and suddenly the people who were streaming were suddenly developing huge audiences in chess. They were on YouTube, on Twitch, and becoming quite important in how chess was being received. And this crept up very suddenly. And later on, as I spoke to people, I realized that, in fact, many of them had started this work in 2017. Yes, of course, they were on the computer a lot, and they liked to hang out till 3 or 4 in the morning chatting. And so they fit in naturally. But at the same time, it seems that having friends from outside your normal circles informs you of things which are happening in other areas. And so the chess players who were out there, and the ones who knew them and visited them regularly and spoke to them, also they found out early, hey, there's some interesting stuff happening in these areas, and allowed these people to have a head start. And that became huge, because the first mover advantage in this case was quite large. So even if you had wanted to try to build a following, let's say 3 years ago, it wouldn't have been easy. You had to have done it when it was easiest, and then ride that wave. And now these people have considerable influence in the world of chess through this, because they're reaching a lot of the audience and so on. I wanted to make the more general observation. I mean, it's not like if I had done that, I would also be a streamer. I don't know that to be the case. As I mentioned in my remark, I don't know that I want to spend all this time at night on the computer and necessarily streaming. And it's not like it's trivially easy. Those require a different set of skills, communication skills, the ability not to be too serious. You have to keep on poking fun at yourself, poking fun at others. It's a different vibe, but nonetheless, it struck me that because I was not hanging out with certain people, I had no chance of joining this world. I still don't know that I would have done it, but it's not like a decision. The decision was made for me by So there are hopefully 2 conclusions you'll take from my lessons. One is preparing for the future is to, the main thing I think is to always be ready to learn something new, a new way of doing things. First of all, most fields are deep enough that will allow it, but also the way we work changes so fast. In my own lifetime, I can scarcely recognize how I used to play 30 years ago. It's that big, the change. So there's a willingness to adapt and change is probably the most important skill. And the second thing, just like I would choose my trainers good in areas that I'm not good at, and so on. Having friends who are interested in things you're not interested in, or friends who do completely different things from you, is the best way to have early warning. Like I gave this example, to have early warning of the possibility in other areas. In most cases, you may not follow that, but it's one thing being aware and saying, yeah, but I think for these reasons, I'm not going to do it, or for this reason, I'm going to do it, is a good possibility to have. Every once in a while, you might find something totally different, unexpected that you didn't want to use, and end up in it, and that's very, very useful. Especially in the world where which we live in which change is so constant. Okay, I hope you could see something there similar to your fields. Yeah, I think we'll do a few questions if you like now. Thank you.
All right, so it looks like we are open for a few questions, and I see bright smiles there. I'll pass on the mic to you, sir.
Thank you so much. This was a fantastic talk.
Thank you.
I have a slightly technical question.
Sure.
You mentioned towards the beginning that, to qualify for a certain level, you have to get some points, and you had to be, I think out of 24 matches, you had to get a certain number of points above. This question is for me and maybe those of us who aren't who don't know that level of chess. What are those points? How does that
Okay.
How does that work?
So we have a rating system, and it basically assumes that once upon a time the base was 2,200. Don't ask me why. Now that base has dropped much further down as the number of people joining, the pyramid needed to get bigger. But the mathematical system is based on the following. If a person plays another person of equal strength, that is, they have the same rating, the expected result is a draw, which means you share the point. If one person wins, then 5 points get taken from the person who lost and given to the person who won. Then there is now a 10-point gap between them, in effect. And this continues game after game. Every single game played in the world is rated on this principle. And the way it scales is roughly for every 70 points of rating difference, the expected score moves up by a tenth, which means from 0.5 it will go to 0.6 and so on. Now once you have that, and I told you the old base was 2,200, but the Grandmaster title hasn't changed. It is still a 2,600 performance. That means a person who has a rating of 2,600 has to have a Grandmaster level performance in every game not to lose points, because exactly at that flow. And so in the old days, you had to play 3 tournaments where you had to play a couple of Grandmasters from multiple countries, so you couldn't fix these things in a single country. You had to score a Grandmaster result, which was the equivalent of a 2,600 performance. That means even as a 2,400 player or 2,500 player, I had to have the performance of a 2,600 player. Once, twice, thrice, like I mentioned, totaling 24 games, then I would get the title. And the system holds all the way top to bottom. The strongest players, when they play someone much lower rated, they get maybe 1 point if they win, but they lose 4 points if they draw. So the system holds top and down. Yeah. Yeah. I could hear you, but I think I'm very close.
So I'll repeat my question for the rest. So the part that I was very intrigued with is growing up and whatever little chess we could understand is very difficult, but whatever we could understand is that you all think like 10, 20, 30 moves ahead, and that's the folklore that everybody gets sold these days. You said you think, most of you think 3 to 4 moves ahead. Uh, how does this, we start thinking that you all think 30, 40 moves ahead, but you actually think only 3, 4 moves ahead. What's this magical difference? Or you are being too humble and...
No, but I will tell you. Hang on. I can sometimes go down lines 10 moves long or 12 moves long, but almost certainly there'll be gaps. I cannot see 12 moves perfectly. If you just do the numbers, it scales incredibly fast.
geometric.
Yeah, geometric progression. The first move, I might have 3 possible moves, and black may have 2 to 4 possible replies against each one. But once you get to 10 or 12 moves in each direction, it's impossible. What we do, what humans do, very, very effectively, to the point where we don't even realize we're doing it, is initially we cut everything down to, I may only see 2 moves that are possible. I don't even realize that 10 moves are possible, but my brain rejected 8. And out of these 8, 6 might lose on the spot. But 2 are borderline. And so, I mean, if you want to simplify the story, that's what computers are good at. They'll catch each one of those borderline things which turn out to be really good. And we'll consistently miss them because it's not our way of thinking. So there are occasionally positions which are like a straight road where humans can just follow the logic and go 20, 25 moves. No problem, because there's no branches. But if you have branches on every end, then it's impossible for a human to go down. I guess we didn't have any reason to contradict someone who thought we can see 30 moves ahead, so we just let it roll. I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I can't ask anything, chess related because you were a grandmaster. But as a HR, I want to ask you because how do you manage your stress when you are ready to, that day, you are going to play your world title. So how do you manage your stress, or how do you manage your nervousness? Because we HR, I agree with all those, my HR fraternity who is sitting here. Every day we have the same stress when we go to boardroom or when addressing the 5,000 people in a town hall. So what is your input for us that how we can manage the stress?
I think when you go for a competition, you already start to feel some stress. Couple of nights before, you'll start to sleep badly. You'll have vivid chess dreams, which you may not normally have. But suddenly,
That happens with us every day.
thank you. And especially, you'll wake up where things went disastrously wrong, especially embarrassingly. You'll make real rookie mistakes in your dream and so on. And this is a very typical pattern. When it starts to happen, I know that I'm getting apprehensive about a tournament or something. Or I'll bite my nails, or I'll fidget. Or, there are signs that I've learned to read. I think you just have to put on your game face. When I go to a tournament, I accept that there's some stress involved and so on. I go to the gym in the evenings before a game. So here the aim is not physical recovery. It's mainly to exhaust myself a little bit, to then fall asleep. And so when I'm talking falling asleep, I don't mean just closing your eyes. I mean not thinking about the previous game. So unless you're able to forget the previous game and focus on the next one, you're not really getting the full night's rest. So that's hit and miss. I mean, some days it's only 20% I will fidget. I'll think of the previous game. Some days I'll manage perfect sleep, whatever. But this is what you aim for. And for the team, I can tell you some nice stories. A couple of times, my team will work very hard so that when I come in the morning, the work is ready. They have some good idea to do. By the way, the problems with sleep occur when you have bad games. When you have good games, you sleep great. In Moscow in 2012, I was trailing in a match, and actually in quite a critical situation, because I was trailing in a match where I was not creating any chances. It's one thing to trail in a match where you are creating chances, but I was And to be honest, I was feeling that this one's gone. Now the only question is what I should do in the remaining games. I mean, that was my mental state of mind. But I came in the morning expecting to see some notes or maybe an email from the team saying, this is the idea we worked on. But two guys were still working at 7 in the morning. And they told me, well, we now prepared this sharp system so that because, because of your match situation, you have to go now and fight. And I realized these poor guys had basically worked from 10 p.m. when I left them till 7 in the morning. And they said two other guys just left at 5 and went to get some sleep. And the idea was they would wake up at 9 and come and relieve these two to go and sleep. And they would work basically till I went to the game, at which point they would all go to sleep. That was the plan. And so I come and I looked at the work they had done for me. And my first reaction was kind of horror because it was very, very risky. And I wasn't sure that I had the time to absorb all the implications, understand everything. But then I felt very embarrassed. I realized that they had been sitting and working till 7 in the morning. And I just told myself, if they're willing to work so hard for me, then I have to play this line. I can't, it doesn't matter whether I'm comfortable or not. If I lose today, the match is over, but I'm going to go down like this. And I mean, not necessarily, but I will do this. And I went and played, and luckily a happy ending. I won that day. So in fact, the match now was okay. And I could sleep much better this night and all that. So that's another way your team helps you manage your stress. They try to anticipate what are the things that could worry you. They put themselves in your place a little bit and give you solutions. But it's in both directions. I also, I had to take that risk that day because, well, first of all, I felt bad for them. But it turned out to be a very good strategy.
Okay. Thank you, but we'll also try to adapt whatever the couple of points what you're telling. But definitely HR is a big challenge for us that it is not that easy. I mean, you can practice and you can on the Grandmaster, but every day I practice that how I can manage the board meeting or how I can manage these employees. But every time we go with a nervous and come back with a nervous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I have handled teams of 5, 6 people and maybe my full team reaches 8. You guys do work with much more, so some adaptation.
Thank you so much. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? What an impeccable speech, and that is love from us to you. Give a huge round of applause. Come on, everyone. Please put your hands together. Thank you so much, Viswanathan sir, for doing the honors, and indeed it was an honor. While we have you here, I request Mr. Karan Jain to please come forward in honor. We'd love to take this moment to go ahead and share our love and gratitude to you. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Well, a small little love from us going right there on behalf of the entire family of HROne. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? We have Mr. Karan Jain, the founder of HROne, handing over love from us to you. Thank you so much for coming, sir. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you so much, Viswanathan sir and Karan sir.